good evening. Welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines. Well, we've, as you probably know, we've had a little bit of excitement around here just recently, but not too much damage, so we're not really, we're not complaining, because had that fire happened when we were in bed, then it would have been a very different story. But I would like to address some of the different ideas of what we are, well, how we are protected. We do actually make a big effort to do the thing right. We didn't ask Nanai to do the wiring, which some of you seem to be implying. So we don't just, it's funny the way that people make their criticism. It is as if they are implying that that's the way that we do it. Like someone said, you can't just plug an appliance into the wall, you know. We don't just plug an appliance into the wall. That's really not how we do it. And there is something that you can't, if you're a foreigner, you can't allow for this aspect of living in the Philippines, and that is that certainly in Beth's family, nothing is ever left plugged in. So, you know, unless it's something like a refrigerator, which of course has to be left plugged in, then it is protected. And anyway, it's unplugged. Now, I'll just take a moment and I'll show you what we do when it's appliances. Now this is obviously an AC unit. Now, I know that that's a pretty chunky, ugly thing that's on the wall there, but that's what's available to us in the Philippines, and that's how that we do it. So even then, the unit is not left plugged in. If we go out, that unit is actually unplugged, even though it does have the trip switch there. I'll just show you again around. Now in the case of the television is unplugged, and now we're actually using that outlet there for charging the phones and for using the computer. So we have got one here. This was never intended to be for the refrigerator, so we'll be having a breaker unit put in there. Now, just to show you, bearing in mind that we've just literally moved in here, we spent one night. Now this is an Art Deco thing. The lighting is behind the mirror, and that unit is not it's not wired into the wall. It has its own socket, and those two lights are plugged into that socket and then onto switches here, and that is obviously never left on. And then we got the larger units. Now that there is a double outlet, because it will have a fan in there, which we've never got round to finishing, right? But the breaker unit is for a shower. See, and even then it will not be left plugged in. It just doesn't happen here in the Philippines. Well, in my Philippines it doesn't happen. So we're kind of camping out at the moment. That's the way that we're living. We're using a double bunk bed. The curtains that we've got, it turns out that they're not so private, you can actually see through, so we'll be working on putting a lining onto those. So that's my quick look at how we're using our electrics here. So you can see that actually while we've had a fire, it's not all down to negligence, and we have had qualified electricians who have made their own assessment, which I'm more likely to go along with if they're qualified. We listen, and we've had a few suggestions which we will be following, but obviously we need to accept the fact that this is the Philippines, and well, things are not done the same here. When you come to somewhere like the Philippines, there's a very good reason for why things are cheaper to buy here. And the main reason for why they're cheaper is because they're cheap. And that's one of the reasons that no Filipino that I know will leave something plugged in. They just don't do it. So every time that we go out, this used to annoy the hell out of me when I first came here. Why are we unplugging these things? Well, one day I was working with Beth at the desk, and for no apparent reason, I've forgotten what it was now, but something to do with the phone system and the computer suddenly just started burning. And then I realized the idea of unplugging things is a very good one. So we had all of the electrics done here by a pro. I don't do electrics, okay? I am a designer of furniture, custom furniture. I design and make custom furniture. And I've done a lot of work on our house. I actually built our house. Now, one of the reasons that our house is actually not lying in the dust right now is because it was made of metal stud. So that little fire which happened did not actually get to go very far. Now, had it been with a wooden, with a timber roof, which is what this house is right now, we intended this as a guest house, and had the fire been here, it would actually be in ruins now. But with the house that I built it single-handedly for a very good reason. In building by myself up here in a very isolated place with no road access, it wasn't going to be built in block. It just wasn't going to happen. We couldn't afford to have people when we first arrived here. We couldn't afford to have lots of workers, not like we're fortunate enough to be able to do now when we build for some other less fortunate person. And so I made the decision to build by myself, single-handed, in a material that I could lift no matter how big the part was. And so I went for metal stud, which I had quite a bit of experience from the UK in working with metal stud. So that's what happened there. And when that fire, let me tell you exactly what happened. We had arrived back from Taliban, and we'd actually been home just a few minutes, and I bought a new toilet seat which I was putting into the extension, and because of the extension being like one building and our house being another, there's a small interconnecting which is about 6 or 7 feet between the two houses with steps up from the extension up to the house, and both but doors were open. I heard the bang, saw, and immediately looked at the step, and that's when I saw, because it was right up by the ceiling, and I saw what had happened. I immediately took all of the breakers out, not took them out, I turned everything off. So the breaker panel is within just a few feet, so the power was cut in just like moments. And then after that we have an office extinguisher, so as quickly as it took to cut the little plastic thing on the extinguisher, the fire was out. And then to make sure, we ripped out the paneling, which is made of wood, and we ripped all of that out to make sure that there was no fire still burning. Right, so that's the amount of damage. It wasn't fire damage, it was the fact that we had to make sure that there was no fire that was still smouldering inside. And what happened next was that there's a massive cleanup. Now we did find out, and this is what has happened, is that the junction box that actually exploded was right beneath the roof at a vulnerable point, and we've been having a lot of rain, and the way that it's beginning to look is that was rain damage, ingress of rain into that box, which once it would be able to withstand a certain amount of that, and then eventually it would get in, and it wouldn't take very much, and that would give that like a little explosion, and then it would be an electrical fire. As you probably saw, people don't know about how to address these things. That's why very often the house is burned to the ground. I know better than to try to put out an electrical fire with water, and so we're very fortunate in that we had a proper fire extinguisher, and that handled the thing in moments. And then from there it was just a matter of tearing stuff out to make sure that everything was okay, which, as it turned out, it was. Up into that cavity was some insulation. So we had, it looks like paper, but it's aluminum on either side, and that just burned away, and that's what was burning that we could see. So all of that had to come out. Well, it was gone, and we lost the ceiling. Now the thing is, the fact that the house was made of metal stud and only the paneling is of plywood means that that's the reason why the house is still standing, because if all of those joists that support the ceiling, if they were all in wood, it would have gone very, very quickly. Before we could get any of that paneling down, it would be gone. We would have been out of the house. Now, a lot of people said, why don't you get the children out of the house? I don't know what video you were watching, but evidently not the one in which the fire was actually burning, and I said, no children, get the children out, keep them out. Listen again. And a lot criticised. I'm not quite sure. These must be people who are going to criticise no matter what. Beth videoed what was happening. Now, there's two things that she could have done. I guess she could have just left, which she's not about to do by leaving me to cope with everything myself, right? So even though I had to ask her, please just stop screaming, you know, she's not going to leave. And if she's going to stand there being a support for me in case I fall off the bloody stool, why would she not video what is happening? It's what we do. Yet we were judged, or Beth was judged very harshly. Why is she doing that? Well, why not? So, anyway, that's the actual story. No actual confirmed reason for why that happened, right? But having these breaker units, which I've already showed you, having them does not prevent a fire. That's not the job of the breaker units. So they're not going to prevent a fire. The fire has already started even if you have smoke detectors, because that's what smoke detectors do, is they detect a fire. So if it were possible to just fit a breaker and then walk away saying, well, we'll never have a fire, it's not going to happen, right? So we're going to have to find out what happened, and it does look like water. And one peculiar thing that I've found about rain here in the Philippines is it very much depends on which direction the wind is blowing in, and very often this changes the way in which a roof leaks. And this is what we found, is that we'll come into the kitchen maybe, for instance, and there'll be water on the floor. Where did it come from? Well, water finds its own level and it will find a place to leak. Now, the next time the wind may be blowing in a totally different direction, and we might get a leak in, say, the living room. Now, tracing these things is a job for Sherlock Holmes, I think, not for lesser mortals like me. So, it just depends on so many things. Someone that we actually respect very much, Robert, has said that we should really check to make sure that the wiring that we have had the house wired in by a professional registered electrician for the barangay should not be aluminum. I don't believe it is aluminum, it should be copper, but if it is aluminum, then he thinks that we should actually have it changed, because aluminum, once it does catch fire, can then smolder, and it can continue to burn no matter what. I think actually that some of the 9/11 was about aluminum and how it burns at 1,000 degrees. So we'll be finding that out tomorrow when the electrician, the registered electrician, comes to look at the work that he put in. Okay, so thanks for looking in and for taking an interest. I hope this explains some of the mystery that may be there. Luckily, because I was there, I saw how the box exploded. We'd had a lot of rain and we were having lightning, but as somebody said, if it was lightning it would have fried every appliance that was hooked up. But as I said, even then, we don't leave appliances and even computers, we don't leave those things hooked up, and for a very good reason, because inferior quality is a thing that you have to live with in the Philippines. That's why very often when you go and buy something, say a spare part for